First caller, Mo from Edgware. Good morning, Mo.
Hi, Mr. Khan. Hi, James.
Hello, Mo.
I'll just quickly, before I ask a question, what your stance on whether this lady Begum should be allowed back into the country. What is your opinion on this? Should she be allowed back in?
Okay, is that your question?
Well, my question is, should she be allowed back in? And depending on your answer, is going to be my follow-up.
Sure. Well, look, thanks for your question. Look, the numbers a way to begin answering that question. I've for some time expressed my concern about young people, vulnerable people being radicalised, being groomed, being indoctrinated. And I think if anybody listening is worried about anybody, it's really important you ring the authorities. The counter-terror hotline are there to help people, and the number is 0800 789 321. As far as this individual person is concerned, I think what's important is for the authorities, that means the police, that means the other authorities, to speak to her if she decides to want to return to the UK, to consider whether any criminal offences have been committed. If they have, then it's really important that following due process she faces a trial, and we'll have to wait and see what happens in relation to that. I think it's really important, Mo, for me as somebody who's a public figure, not to inadvertently prejudice a future trial, but it's really important if people we think have committed criminal offences, they should be investigated.
She has, because she just joined a terrorist organisation. You know, that's okay with rape and beheadings and torture. You know, her husband is linked to the Rock Festival terrorist attack. So why would you even consider risking it? And you're still not answering my question, you know. And at the end of the day, she may have the right to come back if she manages to find her way back. Right, but clearly we need to change the law around that. That's absolutely ridiculous. You know, she's clearly a threat to this country. She has...
I'm going to pause you there, Mo, briefly. She's not. That's the point, isn't it? She's not clearly a threat to this country. But if it was established that she is, then everything you've said would hold true.
Mo, those are some of the questions that you'd expect to be investigated by the police and by the authorities. That's why I've got to be very careful. Of course, I've read the article in yesterday's Times. By the way, we always criticise journalists. This is a piece of excellent journalism, in my view. I find it fascinating, and you know, we should credit the journalists for the excellent piece of work. I think the problem is this. I don't know the full facts. We rely upon the newspaper article, but what I do know is that there is provision in law for the authority to speak to anybody before they come to our country, and if they do arrive in our country, for them to be properly interviewed and investigated, and then charges to be brought. And it's really important for that to happen if that is the case.
You're not going as far as Sajid Javid, are you? He says, we get this absolutely right, I will not hesitate to prevent your return if you have supported terrorist organisations abroad.
Well, I think where I differ from the Home Secretaries, I remember some of my previous experience as a lawyer, which I think my understanding is, unless somebody has dual citizenship or is a national for another country, you can't make them stateless. That's what the international law is. But there is provision there, and I think if it is the case that the police and the other authorities that we know about speak to this person in the country that she's in, and we think she may have committed an offence, as Mo's alluding to, of course those provisions are there, and I think those provisions are there for a good reason. If we think somebody's going to come to this country, not be conducive to public good, is a threat to our safety and threat to national security, of course these powers are there and they should be used.
Mo?
Yeah.
Would you rather see her in a British jail or a Syrian refugee camp?
Well, do you know, this is going to sound a bit harsh. I would just rather not step foot into land where my children are. I don't want to share the same thing. And at the end of the day, Mr. Khan, you have a duty, do you not, to protect Londoners? And
well, he doesn't have any legal influence over this. So you'd rather she stayed in a Syrian refugee camp? So no legal process, no questioning, no interrogation, and very little chance of her unborn baby surviving.
I would rather her never step foot in this land again because my children are here.
Fair enough. SADIQ Khan, let me phrase the question slightly differently, if I may. Should the British government be making any effort whatsoever to bring this woman back? That's not quite the same as asking whether she should be allowed in.
No, I agree with Ben Wallace here. I think Ben Wallace was asked that question yesterday, and the point Ben Wallace made was he doesn't think British life should be risked or resources expended on this individual. I appreciate, by the way, and I spoke about this 3 years ago when we heard about young Londoners being groomed and radicalised. There is an issue about that, and we need to make sure we stop that happening. But I think Ben Wallace was right to say that actually what we don't want to do is be spending monies or risking lives to try and extract people when there are concerns about national security, concerns about offences being committed.
Mo, final question to you, actually. Sorry, because I find this story fascinating on every level. Would you feel any different if she was incredibly remorseful, if she was weeping and wailing and explaining how it had all happened and how she's never felt, she couldn't have felt more wrong or more stupid or more evil, and she's completely repented, or would you feel the same as you do now?
I'm more angry because she has already expressed that she still supports, the extremists. But no, I still wouldn't feel that she should be allowed back in the country if she was remorseful. However, the fact that she's showing no remorse at all and already has shown support, I think suggests that she is still radicalised, and we're basically talking about letting an extremist, a terrorist, with those views back in our country, and that is a definite threat.
That is certainly that is absolutely one extremely valid perspective. I think the next caller has a rather different one.
Okay, thanks for that, Mo. The next caller is from Camden. It's Doc.
Yes, good morning. Is that Mr. Khan?
It is. Good morning.
Okay. This London, she's one of your constituents, more or less. She's an unfortunate, she made a stupid decision. She ended up a prisoner of war. And the Geneva Convention says that prisoners of war should be treated and resettled in a civilized way.
Well, I do not want to talk about this individual for the reasons that I've said, but let me talk to you in general terms. From what I've read in the newspaper, I understand that a refugee camp is different from somebody in relation to the circumstances you're describing, although you're right about international law and the Geneva Convention. The British law is quite clear in relation to what we need to do to make sure we keep...
The Geneva Convention, Mr. Khan, the Geneva Convention is not just British law, it is international law.
Well, I was about to come to international law, but let me finish the point, and then you can interrupt me again if I don't answer your point.
So I apologise for the interruption.
International law is quite clear. What nobody's allowed to do is to make somebody stateless. So, for example, a British citizen is not a national of another country, let alone a citizen of another country. My understanding of international law is you can't revoke citizenship and make them stateless. My understanding from memory is you can do that if somebody has another citizenship or another nationality. So if, for example, somebody was to arrive at our port in this country from another country and there was a concern that they've committed a criminal offence, then I think it's really important for the police and the authorities to investigate that person and for due process to follow. And that could lead to, by the way, Doc, this person being charged in a court and facing a trial. So that's why I'm trying to be careful not to prejudice any future trial. But that's a different point from whether there is an obligation on the British government to go into prisoner of war camps and extract people whose views give the impression that person is still somebody who may have committed a criminal offence, or his views that we find abhorrent, aside from the concerns around criminal law. And that's the question that Mo was alluding to, that James picked me up on. Do I think we should be taking steps to extract an individual who may have committed criminal offences? And I think the answer to that is no in this particular case. Well,
Mr. Khan, I disagree with you. My answer is yes. And then blinking Home Secretary is a buffoon for encouraging the hotheads and ignoramuses, making comments about her being a soldier and this sort of thing. Well, if she's a soldier, then she's entitled to the protection to protect her.
No, but you can't. Forgive me, Doc. She's not a soldier.
Well, your people, what's his name? The previous presenter of yours, he said she's a soldier.
Well, you can take that up. You can take that up with him. But can
I just distinguish this point, which is really important? We don't mislead listeners about the Geneva Convention. If it was the case that a member of the British Armed Forces was in a prisoner of war camp, my answer to the question of extraction would be very different to somebody in the case that you're describing, Doc. And so we've got to distinguish the two. And I wouldn't want listeners to think that the Geneva Convention applies to a situation that's different from what it's talking about. And it's really important for us to distinguish those two things.
I think we'll move on.